Hello and welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Devin DeCuno. On the show today is America's reinvention expert Steve Olsher. College is one of the most important stages in someone's life. It is usually the next step after someone graduates high school, and college can be a vital tool to prep someone in their desired career as well as gain some independence from the family. However, not everyone can afford to go to college. With costs seemingly increasing each year, it's almost next to impossible for someone to pay for school on their own. On the show today, Steve Olsher will tell you why college is the single worst investment you can make. Thanks for being on the show today, Steve.
Well, you are very welcome. I appreciate you having me on.
You know, Steve, one of the interesting things I would like to know is the percentage of students who actually pursue their career choice right after they graduate college.
Well, any guesses?
Wow, I'm going to say...
I hate to answer a question with a question, but any guesses?
I'm going to go offhand, and I'm just going to say between 10 and 25%. How off am I?
All right, well, how about this? Is the question how many actually work in the field or how many don't work in the field that they study?
Let's do both.
Let's do both. Okay, well, then it's just simple math. So 60% of those that go to school do not end up working in their field of study, which means only 40% do. So that the numbers are overwhelmingly in favor of those who go to school and do not actually pursue what it is that what they've studied to be when they grow up. So I mean, it's pretty darn mind-boggling when you come right down to it that 6 out of 10 educational endeavors that are undertaken by the youth of our world are pretty much for naught. So it's a staggering number.
And what would you think is the reason for that, Steve? Would it be because it's the economy's tough out there, or the school didn't prep him enough, or does it come from the student himself? Like maybe the student doesn't have enough drive or whatever to land in where they want to go.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, the issue is that the fact of the matter is that when you are a 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old person, you are still a child, no matter how you slice it. And you're just not simply ready for the most part. Now, there are again, I don't want to say this is the case for everyone, but for the most part, you are in no position to understand who you are, how you are inherently wired to excel, and what it is that you really want to do when you move forward with your life. So it's really, in my opinion, a matter of taking a look at the student and making sure the student is, in fact, ready to pursue what it is that inherent blueprint that they have positions them in the world and in life to really go ahead and make an inordinate difference. And quite frankly, they're just too darn young to really understand who they are.
Right. Now, Steve, while I was reading the press release, one of the things that stood out to me was a line that said you're better off playing the lotto than paying for your 18-year-old to go to school if you want a decent return on your investment. Now, this stood out to me because my parents have been playing the lotto for years now, and I think the most they've ever won was like maybe $100. So how did you come to that conclusion?
Right. Well, the bottom line is they're $100 ahead, but if they're paying for your tuition, they don't have anything to show for it.
Right.
So, I mean, the reality is as I stated, this is more about a parental investment. I'm not suggesting that there is no value to secondary education. Don't get me wrong. I am, however, suggesting that as a parent, we are doing our children a huge disservice by footing the bill and putting them in a social situation that A, they're frankly not prepared for, and B, you're never going to see a return on that investment because, again, it's just misapplied. It's like putting your kid behind the wheel of a $100,000 car and being mad when they crash it. I mean, that's the reality here, because the average 4-year education, which, by the way, very few actually finish in 4 years. The statistics show that it's closer to 4.5 to 5 years, and for many it's 6 or more because of the social element that takes place when you get out on your own for the first time. And so it's too big of a financial incentive or investment, I should say, for the parent When you take a look at what the odds are of putting $100,000 in a lotto tickets and putting that investment into $100,000 of education, I guarantee you're going to do much better if you throw that $100,000 in a lottery ticket.
Right. And you know, Steve, one of the things I was interested in knowing is, would you prefer to send your child to a community college where it may not be so much expensive as university, or do you disagree and feel that college in general is just a waste of money?
Well, no, again, don't get me wrong. I'm not downplaying the importance and the significance of secondary education. The point is that and again, you can probably relate to this. How old are you?
22.
Okay. Are you in school or did you go to school?
I'm currently in school, or about to go to school. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I mean, you're exactly then the type of person that I'm talking about. So my personal philosophy at this point is that the educational system has become too much of an engine and not nearly as much of a creator of people who can sustain themselves and really create a pretty darn good living for themselves. And so what ends up happening is, look at the classes that you've taken. Of the classes that you've taken, A, how many of those classes did you take by choice? And B, how much of that information have you really retained? Especially when you start looking at some of the outside curriculum that's necessary in order to receive a bachelor's degree. I mean, when you start looking at things like, trigonometry and biology and chemistry and calculus and whatnot, I mean, realistically, we don't use half of the education that we get on the general education or bachelor level anyway, and we spend so much money taking courses because of an outdated curriculum that, yeah, I think when you start thinking about what your education options are, community college, junior college, somewhere of that nature where you'd have a lot less money going into that associate's degree, certainly makes a lot more sense. But in all honesty, I just think that we've been given this educational myth for so long here that, frankly, the days of college being applicable for everyone coming out of high school is pretty much irrelevant. It's an old way of thinking that has been perpetuated for generations. And the fact of the matter is that far too much money is wasted, and there are far better alternatives.
Right. Well, you know, Steve, I have a brother who's about to graduate high school. He's going into his senior year right now, and he would like to pursue engineering. One of the schools he was looking at is the University of Missouri, and that's a really big school, and at the same time, that's really expensive. So what would be your advice to him, maybe? You know, that you can give some advice to me and I can pass along to him about maybe, you know, a second route that he can look at instead of pursuing so many of these big schools, because he's been going on college visits, and a lot of the universities he's been looking at, their tuition is like skyrocket high. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a lot of money. And how old is he again?
He's 18.
He's
about
18,
to be 18.
And so he's 17 right now, about to turn 18,
right.
And
right.
He believes that he wants to pursue a mechanical engineering degree. Is that what you said?
Right, right.
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, if in fact he is clear that is what he wants to do, then you're not going to find yourself in a better position than to come out of a big school with that type of degree. You will absolutely land a job. So again, I don't want to come across here as being against secondary education. I'm against secondary education when someone is unclear insofar as what it is that they really want to do and what it is that they are compelled to do. If he has a love for mechanical engineering, and this is what he wants to do with his life, and he is darn sure of it, then absolutely he will be in no better position than he would be coming out of a big school with that degree. So the question is, why does he want to do that, and is he 100% committed to pursuing that as a career? If the answer is maybe or no, well, then he's spending way too much money doing something that frankly will get him no return, or his parents any sort of return on that investment. But if he's crystal clear that this is what he's compelled to do, then all the power to him. He just may be very young and very mature for his age.
Right. Right. Now, Steve, another thing I find interesting is that you pointed out the importance of your child funding their own secondary education. And I was just interested in knowing a little more about that.
Well, I got to tell you, it goes back to the whole cost-benefit analysis. And when your child has no vested interest in their education, the odds of them working their tails off to get phenomenal grades and landing a job after they graduate are significantly diminished. What I have found is that if you take a look at those who have paid for their own schooling, whether it be secondary education or vocational or pursuing a specific career such as, you can name it. There's a million different educational programs out there where you can get a very specific career just for pennies on the dollar when you compare it to a 4-year or even 6 or 8 year education. So the reality is that it's not so much a matter of my trying to cut kids off from that golden parachute or the trust fund. It's more a matter of having them fully invested in what it is that they're doing. Because if you're fully invested, and you can answer this question, pretty much in the same way that you asked it, which is if you're fully invested in what you do, are you going to take that more seriously or not?
I would take it more seriously.
You would say absolutely, right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And so, that's really the bottom line here is once you are financially and emotionally invested in what it is that you're doing, the odds of success significantly increase.
Right. And then another thing I was interested in knowing is the power of sending your child off into the world before sending him off to school. I was just curious to know a little more about that.
Yeah, I think that the fact of the matter is that when you have a child, again, when you're talking about a 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old, you're still talking about a child. And when you have that child engrossed in the options and opportunities that lie ahead, it becomes a completely different dynamic that is irreplaceable when you compare it to the almost like a sheltered environment that becomes an advanced form of babysitting that you find when you put them into a college environment. And so my suggestion absolutely is to take a couple of years off and go out into the world, get a job, volunteer, work for a nonprofit, feed the homeless, do what it is that you're really compelled to do, try things out, meet people, and expand those horizons. Because for a lot of people, we grew up in pretty sheltered environments, not necessarily sheltered from the standpoint of not being able to go out and experience the world, but from the standpoint of only knowing people that are within our very small concentric circle. And so what I encourage people to do is to expand that circle, go out, meet new people, talk to people, and really try to see what the options are. Because when you're that young and you have had such a limited life amount of experience, the odds of you finding something that you're really compelled to do are very, very slight. And so once you get out into the world and you talk to people and you start making money, not only will you understand what it is that you're compelled to do, but you'll have a pretty darn good understanding of what it is that you loathe. And it's really important to understand both sides of the equation. You can't accomplish that within the four walls that you've been accustomed to.
Right, and if I could just backtrack a little bit. So let's say someone was about to graduate high school. They're looking at all their options, and they really can't quite decide what they want to do yet. What would you say? What would you say to them to make sure they're on the right path instead of wasting all their money at this school or school or making a wrong decision?
Say that one more time. I want to make sure I understand your question.
Sure. A person is about to graduate high school and they're looking at all their options. If I go to this school, if I go to that school, or maybe I can just take some time off and maybe do something else before I go to school. Well, what would you say to them?
Oh, I would say the exact same thing that we just talked about, which is from high school to college, in my opinion, to go directly from one babysitting environment to another, when the only real difference between high school and college is that instead of getting the bottle from your mother, you're now really getting it from the bartender. So
right.
The reality is that you have to take some time out. You have to take the time to understand who you are and get out into the world and see what your available options and opportunities are. So from my perspective, you cannot go from high school to college without putting yourself in position to be under pressure to perform, to be under pressure to make decisions that frankly you're not prepared to make when you're 17, 18, or 19 years old.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because I remember, my parents would always tell me how important college is, and it's so important. And I remember one of my friends, he was he's like the only person in his family who ever went to college, and he was telling me like, oh, that now now that I'm going to college, they're putting all this pressure on me to succeed now. So it just got me thinking, like, man, it's crazy if you think about it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, from the standpoint of, it's societal pressure, and I think what we've perpetuated now for decades, if not generations, is that college is the end-all, be-all in terms of creating a career. And Jim Rohn has a great quote, and he says that a formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. And I think that what we just really try to ingrain in our youth, and this is probably the same message that you received, is that you should go out into the world and be able to make a good living. Well, the fact of the matter is that we don't want to just make a good living. We want to make a fortune, and we want to make a difference. That's where today's generation really is. And the only way you're going to do that is to understand who you are, what you're compelled to do, and to go out and pursue that with reckless abandon. A formal education will just do nothing but spoon feed to you what it is that generations have stated that you need in order to be successful. And the fact of the matter is they couldn't be more wrong.
Right. And just to go along with that, I was thinking about some of the famous people who never went to college. And, those people, they just kept working hard. It's, some of the rich people like Mary Kay Ash, Halle Berry, Michael Dell, who's the founder and CEO of Dell Inc. So people like that, if you don't go to college, there's still light at the end of the tunnel. You just got to work hard at, whatever you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, you can take a look at people like Mark Zuckerberg, right? And if Mark never dropped,
guy. Right.
Yeah, I mean, if he never dropped out of school to pursue that idea, boy, I got to tell you, I mean, there would be a lot of unemployed people right now. I mean,
exactly.
that company has made a tremendous difference. But you can even go farther back in time, and you can look at people like Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein, Henry Ford, etc. So, I mean, you have for generations now people that have done phenomenally well without that formal education. So a formal education is not always the ticket to that end of the rainbow, which, again, is really like a utopian myth. It doesn't exist. No matter what you think is going to happen when you come out of school with that piece of paper, frankly, it's worth the value of what it's written on. And ultimately, it's up to you. If you don't have the drive, if you don't have the perseverance, if you aren't compelled to do something, you aren't going to do it well. End of story.
Right. Yeah, and, another person who stood out to me while you were talking was Bill Gates. Bill
Gates is on that list. Steve Jobs is on that list. So, I mean, you can go into the music industry and look at guys like David Geffen. The list is pretty darn impressive. And again, it's not for everyone, but I think at the same token, we put too much weight, we put too much value on this piece of paper, which, again, really has very little value. The value is, when you look at it, companies don't hire pieces of paper. Companies hire talent. And that's what you have to be, is you have to be talented, you have to be driven, and you have to bring something to the table that is of value, period. Companies don't hire pieces of paper. They hire people, they hire value.
Right. And one of the things also I want to talk about was the growing interest rates of college. It seems like every year the cost is almost doubling. Can you explain why colleges get expensive each year?
Well, I can tell you it's a very easy answer, and the answer is economics, because people will pay for it, supply and demand. The fact is, when you look at where we are now versus 25 years ago, to get a degree, it costs 4 times as much money today as it did 25 years ago to go to school. In 1970, 11% of the population had college degrees. Today, it's almost 30%, and actually it's over 30%. So when you start looking at the numbers, the value of that piece of paper, again, is greatly diminished because there are so many people out there who are equally qualified. Worse, when you look at the median salary, any guess at how much money you're going to make when you come out of college on average?
Gosh, I don't even want to guess. I have no idea.
Well, the median salary right now of people that come out of a 4-year college program is $30,000. Want to take a guess in terms of what the median debt is of those students?
Ooh, I'm gonna say it's gonna be over, but I don't know how over. It's gonna be a little over. Is it over 30,000?
It's close, yeah. I mean, it's 20,000 on average. It's about $20,000 right now. And when you take a look at that median debt, and you combine that with the annual savings rate in the United States of America, which is less than 0%. I mean, let's just assume that a college student is going to save 5% and put it towards that college debt that they've now accumulated. It will take them approximately 14 years to pay off what it is that they borrowed in order to go to school and get to the promised land. So when you look at what $20,000 would do for you right now, would you rather have a check for $20,000 and go out and really start figuring out who you are and put it towards maybe creating a business or creating a job or a career for yourself? Or would you like to go sit in the classroom for the next 4 years? What would your choice be?
Oh, I would like the first one.
I would like the first one, right? Exactly. And so, but that's the point. Is we need to start thinking about, as you said earlier, what the alternatives are. And certainly from a governmental perspective, I think we're way off base, especially when you look at the fact that to borrow money right now, it costs you about 8% from the federal government for student loans, about 8%. And that's a huge number because average interest rates right now are about 2 to 3% because of where prime and everything else is. So you're talking about just a huge difference. So who's making money? Who's perpetuating this myth that the college, education is really what you need and you have to pay for it? Well, in large respect, it's the institutions themselves that provide the education, but of course it's also the government who says that we need this education in order to propel our country forward. But the fact of the matter is that the government profits immensely from putting out those student loans. Absolutely, there's no doubt about it. You know what the average student loan interest rate is in the country of Australia?
I have no idea.
0. They charge 0% on the money to go to college in Australia. Now, I'm not saying, again, that this is the right way to look at it in terms of building up debt, because you still have debt no matter how you slice it. You're just not being charged interest on it. But I am saying that there is a much greater opportunity for us to take a look at how to restructure the educational programs and the educational curriculum so that we stop wasting time, we stop wasting energy, we stop wasting money on classes that we don't use. Any idea what the percentages of information that you forget after 24 hours?
You retain after 24 hours?
Yeah.
I'm going to say maybe between 25 and 40%.
That's pretty good. Yeah, most people forget 80% of what they read in 24 hours. So that means you retain about 20% of what you read in 24 hours. As you go out from there, obviously the numbers diminish quite substantially. So when you start thinking back on your freshman and sophomore years and classes that you didn't give a hoot about, how much of that information have you retained?
Oh, God. I would say maybe 20% again, between 15 and 20%.
Yeah, maybe. I think you're just you're being too kind there to the statistics. But I mean that's the reality. Is that, and then think about a class that you really liked, or something that you really want to do, like how to operate, maybe the control board if you want to be in radio or something of that nature. Just think about what it is that you really enjoy doing. How much of that information do you think you've retained percentage-wise?
I'm going to say a little over 80%.
Yeah, I mean, it's the 80-20 rule. I mean, in this case, 80% of what you learned you remembered, and 20% you forgot. So now you've got the inverse relationship between what you've retained and what you've forgotten, because it's a subject that you care about.
Right. Right, exactly. Just like you said, I think college would be more beneficial if you could just jump right into the careers you want to do instead of having to take these gen ed courses. And some of them are important, like English and math and whatever, but it'd be so awesome if you could just jump right in. Because in my case, I couldn't get going until my junior year. My first 2 years, I had to spend taking general education classes before I could go in to my career, which is radio TV. So, I mean, that would be, if I could backtrack, I wish I could, have more training in all 4 years than just jumping right in my junior year.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And so my work is really focused on helping people discover that one thing that they are born to do, and I call that your what. So the question is, what is your what? What is that one thing that really differentiates you from so many others that walk this planet? And so the book that I wrote, which is called Journey to You, a step-by-step guide to becoming who you were born to be, really helps answer that question. And I give the book away for free. So if anyone is interested in picking up a copy of that book, all they have to do is go to journeytoyou.com, and you can get a free copy of the book. And it was actually named the Self-Help Book of the Year by USA Book News. So absolutely, I encourage people to go out and figure out what it is they're compelled to do, and my book is certainly one of the most powerful ways to get to that answer. And so again, if you go to journeytoyou.com, you can get a free copy of that book.
Sounds great. And then another point I wanted to touch on is that college degree. That college degree is so important, and I've heard from so many people that it could take you places and it can really get you going, and that's like your ticket to the world. But do you feel the same way? I mean, obviously it's important, but like how important is that college degree in your opinion?
Well, I can tell you right now, and Rutgers University just did a survey on people who graduated from college from 2006 to 2010. They found that 50% of those graduates are working in jobs that do not require a bachelor's degree. So for 1 out of every 2 kids that graduated between 2006 and 2010, they are working in jobs that don't even require a degree. So I think that the answer to your question is it's not important at all. What's most important is your drive, your determination, your ability to figure out what it is that you're compelled to do and pursue that with reckless abandon. Again, the degree is just a piece of paper, but who you are ultimately is the difference.
Right. And also, Steve, I just want to thank you for being on the show today. And I know you mentioned earlier to our listeners, but can you give your website out again?
Sure. The easiest place to find out information about me is Steve Olsher. That's OLSHER.com. But I definitely ask people to take a look at journeytoyou.com, where they can get a free copy of the book, Journey to You, a step-by-step guide to becoming who you were born to be. So again, that's journeytoyou.com.
That's great, Steve. Again, Steve, I'd like to thank you for being on the show today. I learned so much, about the cost of college and just everything that I wish I had known before, because a lot of this stuff is really eye-popping, Steve. So thank you for being on the show and sharing that with us today.
Absolutely. Well, share the information with your friends. Don't hoard it.
Oh, yes. Yes, I'm definitely going to tell all of them and tell my little brother and everyone that I know that's about to go to college. I'll make sure I let them know all this stuff that I learned today.
Sounds great. Thanks, man.
Listeners, be sure to visit our website at www.beyond50radio.com to sign up for a free weekly newsletter. I'm Devin DeCuna, and remember to live your day past halfway.